It's something that my CEO and founder often talks about how talent is timeless, right? At the end of the day, through thick or through thin, the success of a company in the 21st century is going to very much come down to the people that work for that company. And that's where I brought up that example from that you mentioned, where 100 years ago it was a lot more factory jobs, and it was really about how strong you are, how much throughput and output can you as a human being achieve, right? And today we talk about this being the knowledge economy. And if you really think about it, the best of the best companies out there hire the best talent. The best of the best of the best talent isn't necessarily applying to jobs. Usually you have to go and reach out to them and sell them on coming to join your company. And so, yeah, I think we're going to continue to start seeing that. I do think that if you think about it, not every single company out there is a knowledge based company. I mean, there's a lot of type of workers and work out there. And I do see a world where job boards remain relevant, but there's going to be a big change coming.
Hi, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I am honored to have with me Jared Bruss. And Jared is the Enterprise Account Executive for Gem. Jared and I met at Unleash 2025 in Las Vegas in May. And so I have asked Jared to come on as a guest. Jared has spent a lot of time in sales in our industry. So I am super excited to talk with Jared today about his perspective, his eagle's eye perspective from the sales nest, if you would, of our industry. Especially you had spent how many years with ZipRecruiter as well? 8 years, right? With ZipRecruiter prior
Yeah,
to
yeah, Denise, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the kind introduction. I spent a little over 8 years at ZipRecruiter. I was one of the first 100 hires there back in early 2014.
that's great. Oh my gosh. And then you've been with Gem now 3 years.
Yeah, a little over 3 years, which is hard to believe. I left during the pandemic, shortly after ZipRecruiter went public, and it's been great here. We're doing some really cool things over here at Gem Software on the pre-hire side.
On the pre-hire. So let's talk about the industry then, and from your perspective, just some of the changes that you're seeing, especially we talk about AI a lot. So I think that you have a kind of an interesting perspective because you have been in sales for our industry. And I don't think I have actually interviewed anybody who's been on the sales side of our industry. So I can't wait to jump in and just kind of understand some of the changes that you think are happening and where you see our industry heading.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that question. It's certainly a very deep one, but I think over the last 10 to 15 years, we've really gone from being an industry that's really relied heavily, like in terms of talent acquisition and acquiring folks to come and work for your company. We've really gone from companies really emphasizing that inbound motion, right? Posting a job and waiting for your inbound applications to come in, reviewing your inbound applications, and then selecting the best to then move forward in process. We've gone really from those workflows to really much more of a diverse, like uh, much more diverse workflows where recruiters are being tasked with hunting and going out and finding the best of the best. And perhaps that's because we're much more in a job seeker market, or we became, since the Great Recession, we started entering a job seeker market throughout the 2010s. But teams now are very much asked to not only rely on inbound applications, they're asked to focus on sourcing and working on getting referrals and finding rediscovering past applications and so forth. So we've really seen this change in motion on that front over the last 10 years. And it's been really fascinating to see because most of these dollars were really spent on recruitment advertising dollars. There were these budgets were recruitment advertising dollars and also on applicant tracking system, ATSs. But in that acronym ATS stands for applicant tracking system. And those systems are very much built to house people who come and apply to your jobs. They're not really built to help you go out and rediscover past applications or to source. And so there's an entire industry now that sort of sits in that pre-apply phase, right? A lot of work uh, that recruiters are doing on a day-to-day basis on not just moving folks from application through to hire, but on building and nurturing and developing relationships with warm talent, similar to the way a sales team would do before coming in and actually demoing the product. So it's been really, really cool to see that change over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because we used to call ourselves people sales. Because we were working with companies and we were bringing them candidates, and it was a two-way sales. I mean, oftentimes if you have a product, you're selling a product to one person. In recruiting, you are working to sell the best candidates to a company that's looking for that talent. Plus, you're also trying to sell that client to the candidate that you want to hire for that. So it's a two-way street. It's almost like real estate, trying to find the right house for the right buyer. So it was a very people-oriented sales position that we've all been in. And I appreciate you saying that because as we have transitioned from headhunting, as I recall, back 30 some years ago, we became more of a transactional type of business because of job boards and because of the software that was developed. And we were talking about Monster and Career Builder and how even those initial job boards have changed. Just the whole market has just made this big switch. From your perspective, though, on your end, especially having come from ZipRecruiter to Gem, what are some of the other changes that you're seeing now?
I think that's a great like segue into I think some of the things we're seeing over the last couple of years, and that's the conversation around AI, right? Teams are being asked to do a heck of a lot more with less, and they're being asked to leverage technologies out there, software tools, and now there's an additional layer of AI to kind of help these lean teams do more with less, and we've actually seen that in the data as well. In fact, I was looking it up before, but applications per role, and I went to the Gem benchmark report. Applications per role is up 3x compared to 2021. Job recs per recruiter has increased by 55%. Time to hire is up 8 days on average. Interviews per hire have risen by 42%. And this is in Gem's 2025 benchmark report. And so a lot of teams are stuck drowning in inbound, not enough time to source. And there's a lot of pressure from execs to like raise the bar there. And so I think there's a lot that AI is doing on that front to give recruiters time back to then allow them to like work on some of their other workflows, building and developing relationships with top talent out there, re-engaging with past applications, sourcing to widen that top of funnel. And so that's really the transformation we've seen over the last couple of years. And so I think there's some technologies out there that are doing some really cool things. And I could speak to those too. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the CRM piece of it. I remember when I first started recruiting, we weren't even using computers back then. We were using manila folders. And the guy that I was working for, I walked into his office one day and he had stacks of manila folders all over his floor. And I said, what are all these folders for? He said, these are all different projects I'm working on. He said, but these projects over here in this corner are from 1988. These projects are from 1990, all that type of thing, because I knew that this is going back that far. So he had all of his projects by year, but they were all stacked. All of these manila folders were stacked all over. That was our CRM. So things have changed just a little bit over the last 30 some years, right? With respect to how we track candidates, how
Totally.
we track sales, how we track what our clients are looking for. So let's fast track to now on your side. Let's talk about CRM and what it means.
Yeah, no, I'm smiling because I think you're basically kind of building the business case behind why so many teams over the last decade have really invested in a talent CRM, right? Traditional applicant tracking systems, right, have been around since the early 2000s, right? Right, the Workdays of the world and the iCIMS, the Oracles, those are the big players. But as mentioned previously, those are built to house inbound and track applicants through a system, right? So to your point, I think of a CRM very much as a repository, a system that houses everything that really happens, not just from apply through to hire, but everything that happens before someone applies to a job. So all those interaction, those touch points. Hey, now's not the right time. Let's reconnect next year. Or hey, we're going public in 6 months from now. Like let's reconnect at the end of the year. I think there's a whole host of real examples of folks who aren't ready to make the move yet, but are thinking about making the move at some point, and that needs to get tracked somewhere. So, an example that you provided, and why I'm laughing is when that's not tracked in a system, when that person leaves an organization, that recruiter or that sourcer, that information that was up here, Denise, that you shared, and that was on the floor, that that dies when that person leaves the organization. And so it's 2025. People spend 2 to 3 years at their companies and bounce to the next. And it's really, really important for all that to be housed in a system and not on manual spreadsheets and outside of a system. And so that's where the power is. The power often is that we are the tool, but in many ways, the most powerful teams that use our platform are the ones that actually are using all every where every single recruiter is living and breathing and tracking every single thing within our tool, collaborating with hiring managers within our tool, messaging prospects within our tool, leveraging our rediscovery elements within the tool. And I'm not just speaking to our tool. I'm speaking to recruiting CRMs in general. Why they become such a big part of so many TA organizations.
Well, it's interesting because I've actually interviewed a number of ATS companies over the years for clients for my own business. And one of the most recent questions that I've had over the last couple of years is the CRM capability because there were are there still ATSs out there that don't have CRM capability? If so, I think that they're kind of probably putting themselves out to pasture because I think that is especially with AI, I think that's gonna be more of a regular function. A lot of us were working with ATS platforms. I remember the first one I worked with was called Resumix. I was so excited. I thought it was the
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Resumix?
I have not,
This
you're
goes
aging me
back
right now. I have not, but I laugh because I think what you when that launched, and I'm assuming probably around the dot-com era, that was really exciting because but it obviously was a technology that allowed you to make better use of your time, and I think that's what's happening with AI today. Right? We're going to see the exact same thing 25 to 30 years later, where all of a sudden the output can be you could squeeze even more out of every human that's working or every person working for your organization, and that's what's happening with AI.
Well, I think it's gonna just make us our the human part of our business, like you said, a better function for the organizations that we're working for. Because when we were using ATS platforms before and using, like you said, manual spreadsheets, it's been really I know for myself personally, and those of us who've been doing this for a long time, it's been really hard to transition away from manual spreadsheets to a CRM type of function. And now you have AI on the back end of this, kind of helping to, I guess, drive more CRM capability, right? So let's launch into that just a little bit because for those of us or for people in general who have a hard time switching gears, and I think a lot of us do, and I don't think it even matters which generation we're from. I've had people I know that I was working with, let's see, 1, 2, 3 different job boards, and I asked my team to work with them and to let me know which one they like best so that we could invest in it. I went back and I'm talking about a team of about 25, 30 people. And I went back a month later and maybe 5 or 6, 7 of these people had even touched these platforms. They were used to using LinkedIn. So we were using all 3 of those tools to determine which one we wanted to go with. But getting these people to move off the LinkedIn train, right, onto so it's not just my generation that's having the struggles with moving to these different platforms and trying something new. So how would you train then a team of people then to, I mean, migrate to something that's really gonna work and free up their time?
Yeah, and Denise, you bring up, I think, one of the biggest challenges that like we face today when it comes to training and enablement. For 20 years, folks, recruiters are very comfortable living and breathing in LinkedIn, right? Running Boolean searches, leveraging LinkedIn projects and their query functionality, right? And so there's a lot of change management involved in getting teams used to natural language and inputting natural language into these AI systems to go out and effectively find new prospects that you can engage with. And so that's a challenge that my team and I face on a day-to-day basis when it comes to training and enablement. We usually run these pilot periods, and when we do that, we connect weekly with the teams that we're training and enabling. But what we usually find most effective is that third session when folks come in and they say, hey, Jared, can you walk me through how you would tackle this search within your tool? And other competitors of ours, I think, are facing similar challenges with getting folks kind of off of LinkedIn, or not off of. I mean, LinkedIn will always be there, but leveraging complementary or supplemental platforms like Gem, like HireEasy, like Seekout, and so forth. But that's a challenge that we haven't yet solved. Teams are still getting used to this new world that we live in.
You classify, of course, I go back to the old term job boards, but when you're talking about Gem and Hire Easy and Seek Out, those kind of companies, how do you refer to them?
Denise, it's a good question. So, a traditional job board to me, Monster, Career Builder, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, those became aggregators, right? Post once and get your job all across the web. And every job board was doing that and still does do that to drive traffic to your ads. That model still works really, really well for high volume roles or for blue collar jobs. So when I think about a Hire Easy and a Seek Out and a Gem, I refer to them as talent harvesting tools, right? So those are probably more competitive to the resume database at a job board. So the classic, like, I think of ZipRecruiter very much as a marketplace. The job seeker comes to find a job, the employer comes and posts a job, and that's a marketplace, right? But ZipRecruiter, and Indeed and so many others, also have resume databases, and those are millions of resumes that exist within those platforms that companies can go and spend to acquire. And those are cold leads. Those are people who have not raised their hand to say, hey, I'm applying to your job. Those are people who just exist in the database and are hoping that folks reach out to them and tell them about a job opportunity. So I would say the Hire Easies and the Gems and the Seekouts of the world are talent harvesting tools. Those are more competitive to resume databases because at the end of the day, those aren't inbound leads or applications. Those are folks that you are hunting. Those are folks that have potentially never heard about your company. So we are acquiring those net new prospects for you. And you have to go out and reach out to them to say, hey, I'm Jared from Gem. We have an open enterprise account executive role. You're a fit because of XYZ. I'd love an opportunity to talk to you. So that's how they're in their own like talent harvesting. I call those talent harvesting tools. With that said, another thing that we're seeing across the industry, and I'm sure you saw this as well at Unleash, going back to where we met, is that a lot of companies out there are talking about themselves as being this all-in-one from hello to hire, this all-in-one recruiting platform. And so what's happening right now is you've got these CRMs like my company adding on, building out talent harvesting tools that exist as part with the CRM. Also, and you pointed this out earlier about applicant tracking systems, not potentially like how can an applicant tracking system not have a CRM as part of their solution today? And you're right about that. Most have either built one or have acquired a company to latch on to the ATS. So similarly, Gem over the last 2+ years has been building an ATS, and we actually brought our ATS to market earlier last year. And so you've got a lot of these players in this world where the market is really asking for consolidation because teams are being asked to do more with less. There's a lot of tool fatigue. You've got a lot of players in the space now that have either built, acquired, or partnered with other companies within the industry to create that all-in-one solution. So going back to your question about talent, what I would call a seek out or a hire easy or a gem, I think we're all playing in the same space all of a sudden.
And I think maybe that's where some of the confusion comes in. Some of us, we need names. We need to know, okay, so because we have Eightfold was there, Deem, who are Who are some of the other big companies that have the big fancy booths, right? What are we calling them? We need names in this industry. We need to know. And I love talent harvesting tools. That's awesome because I think that's part of the problem. We're moving so fast. There's so many new tools coming out. We don't know what these tools are. I mean, we've heard CRM, we've heard ATS, we've heard sourcing, we've heard job boards. So as recruiters, we know what those are, but there's so many new tools coming in, like the Deem, like Eightfold, Gem, all these. It's like, okay, so we're inundated. What are we calling these tools? And what are they doing differently than the tools we've been using? So that's why we kind of go back to our desk and we secretly go in and start just using what we're used to, right? Because that's what we're familiar with. We need the right training. We need
100%.
we need to be able to separate things, to silo these different tools based on what they do for us so that we can learn the new technology around them and learn that this is where we go for this, especially with AI just kind of leaching into every aspect of our space. We need to know, are we going to chat GPT or are we going to a talent harvesting tool? Are we going to be using, do we even need to bother with chat GPT right now? Or are we going to use the talent harvesting tools and then use chat GPT for just doing something like maybe writing a job description? You know what I'm saying?
Totally. And what's interesting is Gem has put together a really cool like illustrative diagram that I actually use when I present on our solution to customers and prospects alike. And I think it does a really good job at illustrating. You've got the top of the funnel, right? That's talent attraction, right? That's where the talent harvesting tool kind of fits in. That's where on campus recruiting, right? Talent marketing, ways to widen that top of the funnel, recruitment advertising, right? That's bringing people in, that's engaging interest. Below that is once there's that interest based on the communication, that's the CRM, that's the repository of everyone that you're now networking with, building relationships with that you have somehow pulled into your system, whether that's via the talent harvesting tool, whether that's LinkedIn, the job board, that's the CRM. Once there's that decision, hey, I'm going to go ahead and apply. I've had enough conversations with the recruiter. I feel really good about this. I'm going to actually go start going through the process. That's the applicant tracking system side. So it flows from talent attraction into CRM, into ATS, and then obviously hopefully the hire happens. And so that's, I like to say, one of our slogans at Gem is from hello to hire, right? We touch everything from hello to hire. And then that there's analytics that round out the whole thing from everything at the top of funnel all the way to everything at the bottom of the funnel. Where the gap is applicant tracking systems analytics tools really only show you from apply all the way through to hire. How about everything that happens before the application, right? How about all the outreach that you're sending to try to get someone to have a conversation with you? So Gen's analytics tool, amongst other CRM analytics tools, we marry everything that happens pre-apply to apply and apply all the way through to hire. And it's far more granular than just time to fill. Time to fill is one of the key metrics, of course. That's really, really important, but there's so many others, right? And is part of what we offer here at Gem as well is because we could see that whole funnel, we know we could tell you exactly in real time how many hires in order to make one or two or three hires in a particular department by a certain date. You need to engage with X number of people in order to get Y number of people into process in order to make those hires by this certain date. So it helps folks predict hiring, it helps debug potential bias and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into these tools, and obviously the analytics can all be converted into really like presentable dashboards that recruiters can go and show their C-suite, and at the end of the day, TA orgs can become a data-driven business.
Wow. I like that. But again, I think we need to go back to, you made a comment earlier before we got on this, before we got on this episode. And you said way back a long time ago when people were hiring, and we're going back probably 100 years, like you said, people were hired for their physical strength, right? Because they were working in factories. Well, even now, though, I've seen positions that you have to be able to lift 30 or 40 pounds. So you're
Yeah.
going from physical strength, though,
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're
Yeah.
going to a more knowledge-based type of hiring versus physical strength hiring. So there is a big difference there. What do you think is going to happen to the job boards of today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I also want to touch on the first thing you shared as well, because I have some more comments to make there too. But I'm going to answer your question first. Job boards want their customers to give them all their jobs, right? You have a customer, let's get all their jobs, hundreds of jobs. The more job seekers, it's best for the marketplace. And another one of their goals is to have the companies that they work with actually do the entire apply process through the job board, right? So we would actually be incentivized to sell zip apply jobs, meaning when a job is clicked on, they're not taken away from ZipRecruiter. They're actually taken, they have to fill their application out using ZipRecruiter. And why that is best for ZipRecruiter is because when you complete an application, ZipRecruiter then serves up more ads that says, hey, these are similar jobs to the one you just applied to, apply to them as well. And the more jobs you apply to as a job seeker, the better it is for ZipRecruiter because those folks are clicking and applying on jobs. And so job boards for years have tried to keep their job seekers in their homegrown system. So I do not think the job board space is going to go obsolete because I think there are so many different industries out there that will continue to require a funnel of inbound, right? We have evergreen roles, or we could hire an unlimited number of sales agents to come work for our insurance company because we that's the model of that insurance company. So I don't think they're going to go away, but I think job board companies need to think long and hard about how they could somehow get into that applicant tracking space so that they continue not only to keep their job seekers in their system, but companies who aren't willing to necessarily do that could at least still rely on those job boards to house all of their job seekers and then leverage potentially a CRM portion of it. So perhaps it's a consolidation play. I don't think job boards are necessarily going away altogether though, but that is something that I'm very, very interested in seeing. You track if you look at we talked about Career Builder and Monster filing for Chapter 11 yesterday, June 24th. They filed. ZipRecruiter's stock price is really taken a hit over the last year, and so you are seeing the market react a little bit. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to that industry long term. I just don't think it's necessarily going away, but I think there will be some sort of consolidation. But if you don't mind, I want to go back to that initial thing because you're right. We did talk about that before this conversation, and it's something that my CEO and founder of Gem, his name is Steve Bartel. He often talks about how talent is timeless. Right, at the end of the day, through thick or through thin, the success of a company in the 21st century is going to very much come down to the people that work for that company. And that's where I brought up that example from that you mentioned, where 100 years ago it was a lot more factory jobs, and it was really about how strong you are, how much throughput and output can you as a human being achieve, right? And today we talk about this being the knowledge economy. And if you really think about it, the best of the best companies out there hire the best talent. And that's why companies do choose to work with Gem because at the end of the day, the best of the best of the best talent isn't necessarily applying to jobs. Usually you have to go and reach out to them and sell them, I'm coming to join your company. And that's where the machine that we've built really resonates well with so many awesome brands. And so yeah, I think we're going to continue to start seeing that. I do think that if you think about it, not every single company out there is a knowledge based company. I mean, there's a lot of type of workers and work out there. And I do see a world where job boards remain relevant, but there's going to be a big change coming.
Oh, definitely. Well, and I think the job boards have lacked not just the connection to an ATS and a CRM, but now they're falling behind because of AI. They're not well, I guess there's some AI integration right now with, like, Indeed a little bit, with LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn is trying really hard to push an AI back end, but I know for myself personally, I don't use any of their AI functionality because it's just not jiving with the searches that I'm working on, right? Or what I'm trying to achieve at the time. So I think there's still some flexing that still has to happen there in order for LinkedIn's AI functionality to kind of keep up with what we're trying to do as individual practitioners. They're not part of the bigger ecosystem, and I think that's where a lot of companies, and you talk about consolidation, I do believe we will see a lot more consolidation. I mean, we saw it with the banking industry not that long ago, right? Instead of having all of the smaller banks out there with large banks, I mean, pretty soon there was a lot of consolidation in the finance industry. It's almost like somebody, though, has kicked over the anthill.
Yeah, a lot of people in my life, family, friends, ask me why I continue to be in the space, and that's a big reason. I think it's such an exciting time because there is this like larger transformation happening. I'm constantly looking out for some of the companies out there that I think are doing some really really cool things in the space. There's some companies even going back to Unleash that I got a chance to meet in person who are doing some things on trying to detect application fraud. Right,
Oh,
with
yeah.
AI, job seekers are now leveraging AI to basically make their own personal resumes match a job rec that they see out there, which is, in my opinion, a huge waste of time for everyone involved. But I'm sure there's one or two folks that potentially could slip through the cracks and actually get that hire, even though they're not really qualified. You remember the movie Catch Me If You Can? I'm sure there's some smart folks out there. Yeah, Leo DiCaprio was in it, but he was creating fake checks and pretending he was a doctor one day, a lawyer another day. So you're going to have fraudulent people who get through. Otherwise, I do believe it is a waste of everyone's time to do that. But that happens and that exists. So there were some companies out there doing some cool things on that front. There were some other companies. I'll plug in a partner of ours, two partners actually, Bright Hire and MetaView. They were at Unleash as well. I met their founders. They're basically building and they built the Gong for talent acquisition orgs. And so effectively during interviews, they're recording interviews and they're transcribing those interviews using AI. And it's allowing recruiting teams to really understand like what questions to ask. It's taking notes of the call, but more importantly, I think it's allowing teams to understand what makes a perfect hire, right? And then you could look back at this data from years past, and you could see, okay, this person is an A player at the organization. Let's go back to that person's interview, and let's cater future interviews when we look for someone else to join this person's team. Let's figure out what did we ask this person, how did we find this person, and so I think they're doing some really really awesome things on that front as well. So I'd be on the lookout for them too.
Oh,
But
that's
go
a great example.
yeah,
Thank you.
most most of my clients, at least in the last half year, have been telling me that they're evaluating tools like that. So yeah, I think what Gong has done for sales orgs, I use Gong on a day-to-day basis for client conversations, has really, really helped my workflows. And I'm constantly raising my hand and willing to be part of tests on the sales side. Cause I think if you're not willing and open to what's going on and changing potentially your behavior, your the way you work on a day-to-day basis to up level yourself. Yes, it could be a little bit painful in the front end, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing that, you're falling behind because it's here, whether we like it or not. AI is here, and so we have to adapt.
Yeah, you can't put Pandora back in the box at this point, right? Well, and
Definitely not.
I don't know if it's AI that's the problem. I don't think AI is a tool. It's how we're using it. And you mentioned the fraudulent resumes. Okay, so people have been doing fraudulent resumes way before AI. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that now. Oh my gosh. And some of the I can remember a number of applicant people that we interviewed and they get all the way through the interview process. I mean, some of them even flew to meet their hiring team or executive team or whatnot in another location. And I can remember, I'll give one story that stands out. It was a female executive, and she had made it through flying colors, had flown to meet the executive team. I mean, it was a big deal. She gets all the way through the interview process. They put the offer together, and now we're going to do reference checks. So we're going to check on her education. We're going to check on her previous career history, do a little bit of diving there. So what happens, we find out that she lied about her education. So they withdrew the offer. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we not checking this stuff before we get this far through the interview process? I don't know that that's going to change because you can't really check on these things until someone's getting an offer, right? But at the same time, I mean, this was like back in 2013 when that happened. And that was not the only situation. It was just one that, because it was such a big interview process around this hire, and then to have that happen. So that was fraudulent in a resume.
For sure, and it's been going on forever, but what the velocity at which it could happen today is certainly greater than it's ever been. And the reason why is you could go to any career site and you could pull the job rec, and then you could take that, copy and paste it into ChatGPT and say, make a resume that's perfectly aligns with this job rec. And that could happen. You could build one out within 30 seconds.
Well, the new applicant tracking systems and the new sourcing tools and talent harvesting tools, are they going to is that gonna be the next phase then, is building something in there to detect fake resumes?
Yeah, great question. Coming out of Unleash, it's something that was a big theme when we were there. I heard it from a couple clients that I spent time with. I actually met a few other companies that were building that were 3, 4, 5 person companies that had built some technology, probably looking to get acquired. But I think companies like Gem and so many others are really thinking about it, and it's something on our roadmap now for Q3. So we've heard recently that Greenhouse, a great ATS, they're launching something in the next 3 to 4 months on that front to help detect inbound applications that could potentially be fraudulent. Um, I don't know how every company is going to do it, but there should be a way to like basically leverage like LinkedIn and profiles on LinkedIn to make sure that those folks are certified, and it wouldn't just block those people, but it would potentially flag someone who potentially could be fraudulent so that at least a recruiter could say, hey, we probably need to dig into this a little bit more and just make sure that this is a real person. Um, but to your point, you talked about on the talent harvesting side, right? Because you could easily pull someone that is a fake resume that's public available via the talent harvesting tool. On the side of the inbound applications, you could also detect someone who's a fraudulent application who applies to your job, right? So it could be a prospect, it could be a candidate. And so it's something that is certainly being talked about and is a very kind of key initiative for so many players in the space right now.
I remember in 2015, I think it was, LinkedIn had developed their it was like a course, I guess you could take, or like kind of a certification course to become a certified recruiter on LinkedIn. I wonder if we're gonna start seeing more of that, certified resumes. What's gonna be the catch? What are good, or I should say the catches to determine whether or not a resume is a certifiable and legit resume? Or are they gonna say pending, or are we gonna have different classifications for resumes, A, B, and C? A means, yeah, it's certified. B, we're still waiting. C, there's some kind of questions around it. But honestly though, it's always been that way. People have been lying on their resumes forever. So it's like,
No, it's very true, and that's something that I certainly do remind my clients who are pretty much begging us to have something. This is this has always been a problem, right? Even if not a lot of resumes, 95% is accurate, and then maybe the 5% in the example you provided, maybe everything on that person's resume was accurate except her degree. And maybe instead of going to Harvard, she went to another school. And that's not, I'm not saying that's good, but there's different levels of fraudulent applications. There could be a completely fake profile, fake person. There could be someone who's just lying about one thing or another, but that's why we have the interview process, right? And that's why you hopefully have a hiring team that knows how to sniff this out. I know we pride ourselves over that here at Gem. We involve folks from all across the organization in hiring on any team. Even if it's someone, an engineer, we'll have people who are on like what's it called? Our culture building interviews, right? So like I'm on the culture building interview team, so I could potentially be interviewing someone in a role that I wouldn't know how to do even for an hour, right? And so there's different folks within the organization that are constantly like making sure that we're bringing in the best of the best in. And I think a lot of teams are set up that way, but it is a big waste of everyone's time. And I know a lot of teams are feeling the pain a little bit more now because going back to what I said, they're managing more recs than before and they're receiving more inbound applications than before. And amongst those qualified inbound applications, there is a percentage of those that come and get graded with a high score but are just not real, and that's what we need to solve.
yeah. Well, and that's the problem right there. Before we were dealing with a much fewer number of resumes per job, or as a recruiter, we would talk to just a few people. Instead, now you have recruiters, like you said, with more jobs, but then they're also forced to interview a lot more people. I had one recruiter I was speaking with a few weeks ago, and she said that she interviews 100 people a week. And I said, "Wow, for how many jobs?" And she said, "Well, I've got 25 jobs right now that I'm working on." She says, "I have to interview at least 100." And I thought, that's a lot of people. That's like 20 people a day you're talking to. How can you even remember that? Now she does have the note-taking software, but still, even she said, and with my own experience with note-taking software is it's great, but you're still doing some copy and pasting, and there's some, I think, tweaking that needs to happen there as well. But still, we have
100%.
yeah, we have
Yeah.
just this volume now of resumes. In fact, the term high volume recruiting wasn't even a term until maybe 10, 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, somewhere in there. I never heard the term high volume up until then, because we weren't dealing in high volume. Unless you had jobs, like you said, blue collar jobs, or where you were looking for factory workers, or you're looking for assembly people, manufacturing people, where you had maybe 20 jobs open, and then you had the high volume coming in. But then you had more recruiters working on that too. So
I think that example that you provided is one that I constantly keep in mind, and why like leveraging technology is even more important today than ever before. My mind immediately went to 100 interviews. Each one's probably 30 minutes. That's 50 hours of Zoom calls or phone calls a week, just externally. That's not including anything internal. That's not including any of the follow up and all the other interactions that you have to move folks through the funnel, right? And so, how do you make sure you are, if you're only interviewing for 10 to 15 minutes, that you're putting through the best or the most qualified folks, right? In just a 10 to 15-minute conversation. So, there's certainly challenges there. In fact, I can't share the customer name, but I gave a presentation a few weeks ago, and the VP of TA, and this is a public company, over 10,000 employees, they shared with me and my VP that 50% of their hires last year came from the first 10% of the of people who applied to the job. And what was interesting to me about that was that that tells you that this company was getting so many inbound applications that they weren't able to go through all of them. They were actually just reviewing the first, not just reviewing, but they were basically working in the first group that was applying and putting those people through. And the truth is by not touching the other group of people, you're potentially leaving the most qualified on the table there. And so it became this issue of, not only can AI powered app review products help you reshuffle, re-rank, and work on the best of the best, it could actually help you go through every single one so that you're not leaving any of the best on the table. And we thought that was a really great like business case to then sell our AI powered app review product, because this team can now effectively go through all of them and hopefully not just the first handful that apply.
I so agree. Actually, when I post a job, I cut it off after 2 days. I only take the people who've applied in the first 2 days. I've had people come back to me later
Yeah.
though, because I show up as the job poster. It'll come I've had other people say, "Hey, is that position still open? I saw it posted. I don't see it posted now." And I'll go ahead and take the resume. Sure, you bet. But because of the number, just the sheer volume, I cut off typically after maybe 3 days max, depending on what day of the week I post it, because you're just getting slammed with
Yep.
applicants.
S- s- So Denise, imagine a world where you create the parameters exactly based on the inputs that you provide based on your job rec and maybe some other natural language that you include. You could then you could then get a percentage out of 100 applied to that inbound application. And after using it for a little while, that, hey, everyone over 80% or 85%, whatever that is someone I'm willing to speak with. Imagine having that set up, getting alerted as soon as someone who hits over 85% applies, so that you could then take action on that person immediately. And that improves time to hire again, right? And you could then effectively leave that job open, not just for 2 days, but for a little longer, because you're not so inundated with all these inbound applications. You are inundated, but you're at least only reaching out to the ones that are the most qualified. And at the end of the day, the truth is that the first person, when you post a job and you get inbound applications for 2 days and you close the job, the question I wonder is, if I had left that open for another week or two, could I have gotten the best hire I've ever made? Right? Could I have gotten an even more diverse pool of applicants that potentially were an even better fit, right? So I think that's what a lot of these technologies are allowing teams to do, right? They're allowing teams to really cut through the noise and yeah, cut through the noise and really bring in the most qualified. And that plays into what we talked about before, this knowledge based economy, and the best companies hire the best talent.
They do. They do. I agree. And as far as making sure that these people are legit, I've always said if there's some way that we could check references and check their credentials, education and previous career history credentials prior to starting the interview process, that would be super helpful too. Especially even just checking references. Can you give me a couple of references that I could speak with ahead of? I still think that we need to move the needle on that, but that's just me. But anyway. So, hey, Jared, this has been super informative. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your input and your insight on this. And I think that you are in a really good position to help to kind of guide our industry. I mean, something that you said, talent harvesting tools, just it gave me another like silo of what some of the software is coming out and some of the platforms and whatnot, because it's all melding together for a lot of us. And I think that we need to have those names. Give it a name. If you're going to develop software, give it a name. What's it going to do? How's it going to change my job? And then train me. We need training, and we need continuous training and continuous support and follow up. I think a lot of teams are training people on software, but then, like you said, after a couple of weeks, it kind of tapers off. I think that for a month or maybe 60 days, we need to be tracking with people to make sure that they're using it so that they can feel comfortable with it, so they can kind of wean off of some of the stuff that's not working anymore. There's my 2 cents.
100%. Yeah, Denise, I appreciate it. It's been my pleasure. I nerd out over this industry. It's one that I've spent a third of my life in at this point. I go to a lot of conferences as well. I love to speak with clients. I like to meet with prospects. I like to speak with folks like yourself who've been in the space for a long time and now amplifying your voice and other folks in the space voice. And I genuinely appreciate you coming back and connecting with me again.
Oh, yeah. No, we're friends forever. Thanks, Jared. I really appreciate it. Hey, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
Oh, that's so kind. So I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Jared Bruss, JaredBruss. And then my email address is Jared, Jared, B for boy, at gem.com. But you could find me on LinkedIn. You could also find me at my work email, but that's very kind of you to ask.
Of course. No, no problem. Yeah, you never know. Somebody may want to connect with you.
Always happy to connect and to network. And like I said, when you reached back out to me, I was excited to connect again.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.